Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, your window into relationships, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, and this is the Trauma-Informed Leadership Series episode. I'm your host, Krista, and today we're playing a little bit more with one of my favorite topics, the shadow side of leadership language, when words harm and divide. So, why words can wound as deeply as actions? We often think of harm as physical, but ask anyone who's lived through betrayal, bullying, or abuse, and they'll tell you that words can leave scars just as deeply. For trauma-informed leaders, this is non-negotiable knowledge. Words are not neutral. They either regulate or dysregulate the nervous system. They either humanize or dehumanize. They either call people higher or strip them down to less than human. And history shows us what happens when leaders weaponize words. Let's talk about the us versus them trap. When danger rises or fear takes root, leaders often reach for the quickest shortcut. Divide the world into us and them. It feels powerful, it feels clarifying, and it's poison. Henry Toshfell and John Turner's research on social identity showed decades ago that even arbitrary group labels create favoritism for us and hostility towards them. And newer studies prove how sticky and dangerous this is. Once you start seeing the other side as fundamentally different, dehumanization is not far behind. Albert Bandura called this process moral disengagement. It's a slippery slope where people no longer see harm as harm because language has sanitized it. Collateral damage, animals, those people. And we've all seen it in politics, in workplaces, in communities. Sarcasm about low performers, contempt towards those people. The moment we stop naming behaviors and start branding identities, cruelty becomes possible. The slippery slope from contempt to atrocity. Contempt is not harmless. John Gottman identified contempt as the single greatest predictor of divorce in couples. In leadership, contempt rots culture in the very same way. Scale this up, and history shows us the worst possible outcomes. This is Nazi Germany, where language framed Jewish people as vermin before violence made them targets. Rwanda in 1994, where radio broadcasts referred to Tutsi people as cockroaches, priming the ground for genocide. The American slavery movement, where language codified human beings as property, rationalizing brutality for centuries. These atrocities began not with guns, but with words. And that's why trauma-informed leaders must handle language with reverence. Because what starts as rhetoric can become reality faster than you want to believe. The false strength of weaponized language. Here's the really big danger. Dehumanizing language feels strong. It rallies people. It unites us against them. It simplifies complex problems into enemies that we can point to, but it's not real strength. Because once contempt drives the narrative, repair becomes nearly impossible. Dialogue collapses, justice turns into vengeance, and the leader who started it has left their people broken, not resilient. Authoritarian leaders throughout history have demanded trust in this way. You have to trust me. Dissent weakens us. And that's not real trust. That's counterfeit trust. And it leaves communities fragile because when that leader falters, the entire structure collapses. So let's talk about safeguards for language with integrity. What does it look like to lead differently? How do trauma-informed leaders resist the easy shortcut of weaponizing their words? Separate behavior from identity. Those actions are harmful, not those people are evil. Name impact precisely. Instead of sarcasm or contempt, describe what happened and how it affected the mission. Protect dignity while enforcing consequences. Accountability doesn't require humiliation. It only requires clarity. Audit your own speak. Ask, am I slipping into us versus them language often? Am I using contempt to fuel powerful instead of truth to build trust? And model repair, because when language wounds, leaders have to own it and correct it publicly. That act doesn't weaken authority, it strengthens credibility. So what's the role of systems in language? Words don't just live in speeches, they live in your system. Your mission statements, your codes of conduct, even the way that you write reports and policies, all of these embed language into the bones of your organization. At Battle to Be and the Rise Up Phoenix Trauma and Crisis Institute, we are very intentional about this. Our phrases like respond, recover, rise up, they're not just catchy slogans, they're codified commitments. They ensure that whether it's crisis response, survivor aftercare, or leadership development, the language we use is consistent, dignifying, and actionable. Systems hold us accountable for the words we say. Without them, even good intentions drift. But with them, values outlast all the individuals. What about when words no longer work? This is a hard conversation. Language does have its limits. There are moments when words cannot persuade, cannot repair, cannot move an adversary. To cling to language alone in the face of violence is naive. To abandon it altogether is despair. The leader's task is to discern the moment, to know when words still matter and when actions must follow. But even then, the legacy of our words matters, because long after an action is taken, it's the words we spoke that will be remembered, quoted, and repeated. So here are a few reflection questions. As you think about your own leadership, I invite you to reflect deeply. Where am I tempted to use us versus them language, and why does it feel satisfying in the moment? Do I ever slip into contempt, sarcasm, mockery, labels, especially when I feel frustrated as a leader? How am I embedding dignity, protecting language into the systems and structures that I oversee? When was the last time I repaired harm with my words? And what did that require of me? If my words outlive me, what story will they tell about my leadership? The shadow side of leadership language is real. Words can be weapons of division, contempt, and cruelty, and they can also be anchors of healing, dignity, and resilience. Trauma-informed leadership demands that we resist the shortcuts of contempt and weaponization. It calls us to use language as a force of repair, not destruction. Because one day our buildings will crumble, our names will fade, but our words, for good or evil, will remain. This is Krista Fee reminding you to rise up out of the ashes of your experiences and live and lead your life on fire.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement today.